the first people to get that new money that has been created without feeding energy into it takes the most advantage because the prices have not gone up when they get the money. But I wanted to move on and say and start talking about the time period between 1700 to 2000. And the question is, if gold was such an amazing tool for unit of account and money and exchange, then why we eventually end up losing that status in 2000? What were the challenges of holding or using gold? And the way I understand it, that the challenge was the friction of transferability of gold in any scalable amount and a slight friction of divisibility of gold. Although you have coinage, but the problem was that you cannot break a gold coin. So you have to create a silver coin, you have to create a copper coin to try to and link it with a gold coin and back it with a gold coin, that copper and silver and other aluminum and other coins you can make it. And you can, but they are easy to copy. But, if they become more valuable, if copper becomes, more valuable, somebody can come and find copper and start minting those coins. Then you have to enforce that nobody else copies this coin, right? Then you need to create an enforcement of preventing someone. But you don't have to prevent someone from finding gold because it's hard. But if you are linking a copper coin for divisibility to a gold coin, that copper has become more valuable than it takes time to find it. So resources to find it is easy. So now you have to bring in force to stop someone from taking that copper and making copper coins, because then they will be back with your gold. So already in some ways you have created a kind of a credit on gold. Copper coin is valuable not because copper is hard to find. Copper coin is valuable because you have backed that copper, that 5 copper coins are equal to 1 gold coin, or 20 copper coins is equal to gold coin. So you have created a backing, a credit onto that gold.
So basically, you are basically saying it's not like getting 1 gram of gold. Let's say gold to copper transfer ratio is 1 gold coin is equal to 5 copper coin. An honest exchange would be that getting gold is exactly 5 times harder than getting copper. That would be
and that's not true.
Honest, basically exchange. But when you just pass a law and say that 1 copper is equal to that much gold, and if copper is easier to get, then people just dig up the copper,
just make
a bank, and basically start getting gold out of the bank. So, right. That is the problem.
But so the problem that has happened here, but because of you artificially setting an exchange rate, you created a claim on gold. And the problem was you needed to create a claim for 2 reasons: transferability and divisibility. That every time if you have to move gold to make a decision for large purchases, it was hard to carry gold. You can get robbed and things like that. You need to have force.
Also, we all know about the stories of sunken ship with gold treasures, right? So a lot of those ships probably were transferring gold from one country to another or something like that.
Exactly. Payment or on something.
And pirates, pirates, that's why the pirates existed, to basically take the gold from all those ships.
The transferability was hard, but on large scale, on large numbers. But on small numbers, the divisibility was hard. So it was not good for large exchanges, it was not good for small exchanges. Yeah. So the way to solve it was to create claims. And original claims was hard claims. They were copper coins and copper tablets and silver coins and so on and so forth. But gradually, they started to make it even more easy, because copper need to be mint and this and that. To make it even more easy, they started giving paper claim once paper became commonplace. They said, forget the copper coin. We'll just write on paper that this is your claim on 1 ounce of gold that we are holding in our vault, and this is as good as gold. Here's your claim.
Receipt.
That claim started to dissociate, from the gold from what you're actually exchanging. Mm-hmm. And now the incentive is to issue more claim than the actual gold you have. Let's say you have 100,000 ounce of gold, and instead of issuing 100,000 claim, you say, well, who's going to count? Let me issue 200,000 claims.
Oh, sure.
300,000 claims. Right? Not everybody come back to get the gold back from me.
Yeah. When it comes to money, there is always incentive to cheat. And just a side note, Danish, coins have these grooves on the side, these ridges on the side. These. Right. You know why those ridges exist? They exist
because silver
Yeah,
off.
people used
Do
to.
you know who created those ridges?
I don't know off the top of my
Isaac
head.
Newton.
Oh, Newton. Okay.
Newton was the official mint, official holder of the mint under the Queen, and he was the one who came up with this idea of adding ridges. So you can tell if
I
the
love
coin is
this
rubbed or
simple. I
not.
love this simple solution. This simple analog solution, mechanical solution. They're so extraordinary.
Exactly. You can easily look at the coin and say, okay, it has been tempered or not
Yeah,
tempered. Because people were
exactly.
literally shaving and cutting. I actually saw pictures of some of the coins, old coins that were discovered, that have these kind of straight lines on the edges where you can tell there was a piece that was cut or shaved off of this coin to try
Yeah.
to still sell it for the same value. But so I think this point that once you issue claims against the gold instead of the gold itself, that led to the downfall, whether the claim was in terms of copper coins or bronze or other coins, or especially when the claim became the certificate, the gold certificates, and then the currency notes, the reserve notes, and so on and so forth. And once you do that, once you create that barrier, then who's gonna audit the auditor? Who's gonna judge the judge, right? So if you are the authority and you're the most powerful person, you're the enforcer, and you start issuing, you have the incentive to issue whatever you want.
That is true. The Roman saying is that quis custodiet ipsos custodes. Who will watch the
Exactly.
watchman?
And then I want to close the
So,
session with this last point. Then we have touched on the first three issues: what is money supply, and then what was the wrong with gold, and and so on and so forth. And I want to just finally talk this last point that we talked about two approaches where money supply remains low or constant. Let's say almost constant, like gold. So then each piece of gold or each ounce of gold becomes more and more valuable. Supply is short or limited, and value is rising. So each gold can buy you more and more as the time goes by. That's approach one. And the approach two is where you say, I'm going to keep adding more money will always buy you 2 bushels of corn or 2 bushels of wheat. That means that as the wheat production becomes better, you can add some more money into the supply circulation. It will still buy you 2 pieces of wheat as long as you can match it. If you do a decent matching job, then you can control the money supply so the value remains fixed, but the supply keeps increasing. Those are the two approaches. And it brings me to the two economics approaches, the Keynesian model and the Austrian model or Austrian economics. The Austrian economics.
before we go, I think it's a good point to stop for a second and basically just say that where we are in the evolution of money, how can now the system can be abused at this moment? Like the moment when the coin was created, how can system be abused? One way of abusing the system also is debasing the coin, as the government basically want to issue more gold coins, but they don't have more gold. They start actually adding more copper to the coin, and they're still saying it's a gold coin. That's one way of basically government be able to issue more coins than they should. That's one way of corruption. The other way of corruption, as you just mentioned, that banks, for example, issuing more receipts for the gold than they actually have, like loaning more against the reserves that you actually have. That's another way. And third, we talked about getting the shavings off of the coin. There's actually a law, some law which is called, I don't know if I've forgotten the name, but the saying is that it says the bad money drives out the good money. So bad money drives out the good money means that if a country has a circulation of pure gold coins and tainted gold coins, everybody basically suddenly pure gold coins will vanish from the system.
People will steal it or hoard it. Whoever gets it will not spend it.
Exactly, they'll not spend it. So at each level there are ways to basically cheat the system, and it's interesting to note that those avenues have been basically taken by government and anybody who has basically authority to issue money or have reserves of gold or access to gold or things like that. So, but that's an important point, that in the evolution of money, at every step, who can people who are in a position of abuse, they end up abusing it.
Right. So coming back to that Keynesian model and Austrian model, and the Keynesian model basically proposes that as you increase the money supply, it incentivizes people to also increase the goods supply so that each unit will buy the same thing. If you want $1 to buy 2 bushels of corn, as you slowly add more supply or fastly or whatever, it will push the economy so that eventually it will catch up, and then that dollar will buy you the same 2 bushels of corn that you, or wheat or whatever you wanted it to buy. So the economy will catch up to the increasing money of supply. And sometimes also called modern monetary theory, that if you inflate the money, it becomes an economic engine. It feeds into the economy, and everybody's now excited that we have a lot more money to spend, and that spending will lead to more work, and more work will lead to more resources, more goods, and GDP will catch up. So GDP will always catch up, and if you throw in more money, it may take a little longer to catch up, but eventually it will catch up. And actually, sometimes they say the slowness is not linear, which means that the more money you throw, the faster the economy will try to catch up. The GDP will grow faster and to try to catch up.
It's a consumption-based economy, right? People have more money to spend. They will spend more money, and then basically producer will match up the supply. So it's a kind of a consumption-based economy. And then that's how economy, they say, will expand. But let's go to the Austrian model.
The flip side is the Austrian economics. And Austrian economics says that the inflation is not needed, definitely not needed for economic growth or economic engine to rev up. Economic engine revs up in the response to the needs of the people, not the available money supply. It responds to the need and desires of the people, not to the availability of money supply or the unit of account. And it then goes one step further and says that the inflating money supply actually hurts and slows down by disincentivizing people to speed up and respond to humans' needs and desires. So A, it's not even needed. The GDP will respond to humans' ambitions and needs and desires and demands. And B, it actually dampens the impact on production of the human needs and desires by redirecting resources in a wasteful manner. That it actually adds waste to the system. The system that would have worked perfectly without this added money supply would now become wasteful. And all this free money, because there is this, even Cantillon effect, which both Keynesians and Austrian both accepted. The Cantillon effect says that when you inflate the money supply, the first people to get that new money that has been created without feeding energy into it takes the most advantage because the prices have not gone up when they get the money. Eventually, as the money spreads around into the system, the prices go up, and the last person to get that money has no benefit because now everything is more expensive. So in real terms, he still can only afford what he could afford before. But the people who get it first, which are usually the bankers or people close to the bankers, they get the most benefit out of the system. So they skim the system, they capture the assets, they capture hard assets, whether it be gold, commodities, land, food, and all that, and then they start selling it expensive to the people who are the last one to receive that from the first people. And so that is a crime. It's criminal to create more money, is the Austrian economics concept.
Now, we are now basically at this. This is a very important point, actually. One important point, one psychological aspect I will discuss. The psychological aspect is that people make very broad statements, but they forget the nuances in it. And nuances means everything, right? Putting money into the system will make the system more productive only if the money is the bottleneck in the system, right? If, for example, let's say where is the money? So bottlenecks. A lot of times, what you need is labor, you need material, and then you need the money for labor and material to basically work and build something. Right, money is basically that lubricant which makes things happen. If that lubricant is a missing part, then and you put the lubricant there, the exchange will happen, production will increase. One example would be Danish microcredit.
Let me counter that and say that what you're saying is right, that money will lubricate the results, but that does not require new money creation. New money creation, let me complete this point because I think it's important. That there are two ways that someone who has a good idea can get the money. Let's say I'm a founder, I have a great idea, I've identified that people need new shoes. The current shoes are not comfortable and people cannot walk enough, and there is a need for new shoes. And I have a new shoe design, I know what machinery is needed, I know what labor is needed, I've talked to the suppliers of the material, I've talked to the labor, everybody's on board. All I need is now that investment to get started, right? Now, there are two ways to get that investment. A, I go to government and say, print some money and give it to me, but that goes through a banker, a printing mechanism. And when I go to the government, give this to my money to me, there are 100 other people lined up with their ideas, and they're competing with the same free money that has been just printed. And because it's free money, the bankers have less incentive to give it to me as a better idea. There may be another catchy idea that I will create these flashy shirts that everybody would want, and they are adding no value to anybody's life, but they look flashy, they'll be awesome, have great story and narrative, and the free money created will just go over there. In contrast, in an Austrian world, I have to go to the market because no new money can be created. So I have to go to people who already hold the money. And if I am holding the money, and this money is going to appreciate at a rate of 5%, 10% every year, let's say 5%, because GDP will go up, then I will really need to evaluate your idea. How reliable are you? What's the chances of failure? What's the risk rate? I will be risk averse. I'll like all the bad ideas. I'm going to just skim them out. Your shoe idea is great. I agree. I love to have a new shoe. I can see you've done your job. I can trust you. I'll give you my money. Here's the credit. Then your return will be more than 5%. It's going to appreciate. So now I can invest. See the difference? That's the point I'm saying. You can still get the money in an Austrian model, but the threshold to get the money is now a higher bar.
Okay. Let me give you a different example, not of investing, because in an investing example, your position perfectly makes sense. Let's think there is a guy who does not have money to repair his car, right? And he loses his job because he cannot drive, cannot commute to work, for example. And now, as a result of that lack of money, he basically the overall productivity of the system is decreased. His own capacity to work is decreased. He's willing to work. He just does not have, for example, tool to go to work.
Sure.
Right. Now the question is that where would he go?
Right.
Basically,
let me answer that too. But I'll let you finish. But I understand what you're talking about, and I have an answer to that too.
So to help those people who basically are stuck in these kind of situations, a lot of homeless people, for example, if they can have some place to live, it's quite possible that overall productivity, basically, what you're putting money into the homeless people and what you're getting out, maybe what you're getting out is more than what you're putting in.
Right.
But the problem
so I think what you're talking about is,
let me start. There are two options. One option is to tax the existing money, and other is to issue the existing money to give to those people. I mean, where else there is no other way to
right. But clearly one is better than the other. Taxing is better than the other because you are still responsible to the people you are taxing.
Yeah.
Tax holder holds the power over you.
Yeah.
When you go to them, I'm collecting this tax, they will come back to you and say, okay, where did you spend it?
Sure.
Show me which poor guy you helped, or did you buy a new plane for your wife or something like that? Where did you spend that money, right? So you are accountable to the tax holders, right? That's the Boston Tea Party. That's the whole tea taxing issue, that you cannot tax us and not let us judge you and make decision in the British Empire. And you say, we'll just tax you. We're not accountable to you. That doesn't work. But if you allow the power to cause inflation tax and inflate money, now that's a hidden tax. Now the people who are inflating, they can do all sorts of wastages, and they can hide it, they can spend, they can do extravagant, and how much they tax they can decide on their own. They say, oh, the poor need a lot, and we need to create some more money and this and that. There will be very wrong incentive, but you give them a free hand.
Absolutely.
And that's why in old religious tradition, tax was always the issue. Of course, they called it charity, but in some sense it was a tax.
Yeah.
It was a tax model, like for example in Islamic law. The concept was that you pay a tax on whatever you have left at the end of the year, which is more than your needs. Whatever your saving is, you pay a certain portion of it as a tax back to the society because of the good life you have, and that's a beautiful model. Tax the people, and then you're accountable to them for the tax you're collecting, but you never print the money. You do not give them a cut.
Printing the money is basically a weaseling your way out. It's a cowardly act. Right? When you print the money, you are not facing your creditor, the person who's not creditor, the person who's paying your tax. You're not facing him and saying that I holding your money and I'm responsible for it. Government basically government do another evil actually. One is that they print the money, so they're not answerable to their constituency after that because they're not collecting taxes. Secondly, they also borrow money. That's another thing. They start borrowing. See, the point basically they're both borrowing and printing money, inflating the money supply, both of them actually are also creating political corruption. Both of these processes have also made the political process corrupt, because politicians basically are not fiscally responsible anymore.
That reminds me of a story that I read in one of the books, which was that when England was going to the war, the way they used to pay for war was by issuing bonds. People will buy those bonds, so people are lending their money to the government to say, okay, and it used to be a cause-based bond. So it was a war bond. So they will issue a war bond, and if the people believe in your war, that our war is just, they will lend you the money. So when there was, I think it was World War I or Napoleon War or something like that, an old war, the British Crown tried to, I think it was the Napoleon War, tried to issue war bonds so that they can raise money to go for war. And the people didn't want to go for war.
Yeah.
They refused to buy the bond. So for 3 days or 4 days of floating, the bonds were just not selling. And the government says, well, we'll not have enough money to buy the weapons we need to go to war. So then the Rothschild stepped in, and he created this kind of a credit swap, where he did a lump sum buying for creditors who were not British citizens. They were in Germany, in France, in Switzerland, and other countries. And they sold those bonds in those exchanges to those citizens who have nothing to do with whether war happens or not, by increasing the interest return that they're going to get and using their own credibility. So they created the swap where British citizens are not paying for the war bonds anymore. They are being sold across in lump sum amount by these so-called hedge fund manager or pension fund manager, people who have 100,000 Swiss citizens who says, oh, we want to spend our money and Rothschild can give us 12% return or something like that. And that's how they sold it. And so these kind of manipulations started back, those 200-300 years ago, to try to fool people into supporting things or get things done by government that people are not supporting. People didn't want that war. They didn't want to fund it.
Yeah. No, that is exactly true. People never want war. This is a universal sentiment. Public never.
Unless you're being oppressed. So if you are the oppressor, usually your citizens don't want to support it. But if you're being oppressed, they will support you. They will give you the jewelry or whatever you need to try to fight back.
Let's say there's a country which is not as divided as, let's say, United States is, on different lines, racial lines, the big one. In a country, let's say, that's a country like Germany, for example. It's basically a homogeneous country. So in those countries, people have no desire to go to war. No desire to go to war. And it's always the promises made by politicians and fast-talking politicians, and basically, always boogeyman, you're scared of making you scared of boogeyman and basically take you war. But that's a separate issue. I think we can.
All right, so let's conclude this first section here. I think we're all on the same page. Our concepts are similar, and my last conclusion will be this chain of events that the governments were issuing paper notes, which were certificates for redeemable for gold that the governments were holding. They became the largest depositors, and they created these large banks like the England Central Bank and so on and so forth, which were holding these gold deposits, and they were issuing credits against it, not only to people but also to other government. And then the wars happened. They issued more paper certificates than the gold they actually had, and people didn't realize as much as the other governments did. And gradually they started realizing they need to claim because the gold is getting cheap. They have a lot of these certificates issued, and that led to they stopped issuing the redemption. They stopped the redemption of those gold against those certificates they're issuing, and they changed the title on the paper notes, which initially said that this is a claim on gold deposit, and then it went away and it became just a legal tender to settle the debts, and has nothing to do with any claims on any of the gold or something like that. And it was officially in America. It was officially stopped for the people in 1963, that the people cannot claim for gold anymore, but the banks could and other governments could. And in 1971, they finally stopped it for other governments too. And they said, no government, we don't owe any more gold to any other, and all those claims are useless. They are just legal tender, and we can take it and we can give you back more legal tender and so on and so forth. You can settle your debts through it, but we don't owe you any gold or something like that. And after that 71 debacle or so forth, initially the dollar went down because people said, well, it's not linked to anything. and then eventually went to Saudis in 73, and they made an agreement with Saudi where they said that all purchase in the international market of oil will be in these legal tenders, dollar, which are legal tenders for debt settlement. And Saudis went along, and they, of course, they needed something else. They needed the royal family needed some international validation that their princehood on the Saudi Arabia was valid, and they need someone to support them and say their claim on Saudi Arabia and so on and so forth. And there was probably also security issues. They needed security and all that because they were not that good in fighting wars, against Iran or Yemen and so on and so forth. So they made this exchange, and that's how the dollar again got backed by something which was backed by this promise that you could buy oil from it. And once you can buy oil, you can buy anything else from it too. And it became a legal tender that way.
I think there's a lot more juice left in the ideas of Keynesian school and Austrian school, and also you have basically
I'm keeping it
very fast through
intentionally.
a very detailed process. You have ran fast. I think we should.
No, I'm keeping it brief intentionally because I want to spend a little more time on explaining Bitcoin, because I wanted to just give this as a context to our actual discussion on Bitcoin.
I think people
which
will
I think is
that context. I think it's not very
poorly
important.
understood. Yeah,
I think
that's why I went. Yeah, we can have separate discussions just on that. But I think this is enough context for Bitcoin. And in our next video, I will quickly summarize the challenges between 73, 75 or so to 2008, where the white paper was written, and then we will start talking about Bitcoin itself. What was the Bitcoin network?
And one important point I want to emphasize is that at this point, we can already see that how money is completely disconnected from actual economy at this point, and it's basically has taken a life of its own. Like all the things are basically happening to the money part of it. An economy is basically a second thought somehow. Economy is kind of chugging along, and people do things, and innovators invent things, and technology advances. But the main action is basically in the symbolic part of the whole equation, so to speak. So
Exactly.